I want to bring in Tom Mulcair into the conversation on this, CTV News political commentator, former NDP leader. Tom, it's always good to see you.
Good to see you too, Angie.
Listening there to what Defense Minister Anita Anand is saying, these claims of genocide, the implications here, because of course we know that there are numbers of investigations underway with regards to war crimes against Russia, against individuals, against Vladimir Putin. But your thoughts here on, we're looking at the bigger picture implications of what's happening in Ukraine.
I think you're using exactly the right term. It's the implications. And that's why Anita Anand stops just shy of actually affirming that there is a genocide. She said a strong argument can be made. Similar to Mr. Trudeau a couple of days earlier, he said, well, I'm glad that people are starting to use the word because it certainly could amount to that. But Canada is not going as far as President Biden did earlier in the week. Biden outright asserted that we are facing a genocide in Ukraine, because that opens up onto an obligation. You can't just say, well, there's a genocide going on, and then stand there and do nothing. So there is a duty to get involved. There's a duty to protect. There's a duty to defend that comes along with that affirmation. That's why Canada's being a little bit more prudent. I know that having talked to some Americans, they were a little bit concerned that their president had gone that far. But if you do look at the definition that Minister Anand just put out there, then it's obvious when Putin's starting point is Ukraine is a fiction of history. The Ukrainian people do not exist, and he's going to take over that territory and make sure that the Ukrainian people no longer exist. Then, of course, you're faced with a genocide. And the world, of course, and Canada and NATO and all of the allies have got to start some more serious discussions about what we're going to do, because we can't stay there with our arms folded and just affirm that there's a genocide.
So let's talk a bit more then about what that duty could potentially be based on, again, Anita Anand being very close to saying it, but not as defined as we heard from U.S. President Joe Biden. But that duty, what it means in terms of Canada's duty. We've heard about the unwavering support. We've heard that from the Prime Minister, from Anita Anand, from Melanie Joly as well. But Ukraine is asking that's got to be stepped up much more to much more extent. But the line, of course, is depending on how far we step that up, we're avoiding to keep NATO directly involved.
Everyone's got the same analysis. Yeah. The day NATO troops start shooting at Russians, you've got a world war. And if the whole purpose is to try to stop this horror, you're not helping the situation if you create an even greater horror that'll affect many more people. That's why wise people have got to look at this in the right way. But if the Russians do go to chemical weapons, because there is an affirmation out there, but we're not confirmed yet, that they are using them, then that duty to intervene almost becomes peremptory. You're almost compelled, you're obliged to go forward and to start to intervene. So we've done a certain number of things. Canada and other nations have supplied weapons. The International Red Cross has been there making sure that the humanitarian corridors, to the extent possible, are opened up. I think that Canada is well placed to start trying to push for more serious peace talks, because Canada does have a good reputation. There are other NATO allies you can think of, like Turkey. They have a historical relationship with the Russians. There might be an opportunity there as well. But every effort has to be made now to try to scale this back. But short of that, if the Russians do persist in their attempts to destroy the Ukrainian people and Ukraine, then all bets are off with regard to the next step.
Really quickly, Tom, I'm out of time here, but I want to try and squeeze this in like 20 seconds or so. We've talked about Mariupol. We know that there are foreign fighters. Many we know have come from Canada that could very well be there. We were listening to Danielle Hamamjan's report for us, the update she gave us. That possibility of there being European fighters there, including Canada, if those individuals are attacked or killed, does that change the narrative here?
No, because they're there of their own free will. They're people who volunteered, a little bit like people who went in and fought the fascists in Spain in the 1930s. They were doing it because they thought that this was the important thing to do internationally. There are Canadians there, we know that. There are people from other NATO countries as well. We'll have to make sure that the rules of war, the Geneva Conventions and such, are applied to them. It's not because they're from a different country that the Russians don't have to treat them properly. But it's been a very brutal war so far on both sides, it has to be said.
Indeed. Tom Mulcair, it's always good to have you, CTV News political commentator, former
All the
NDP
best.
leader. Thanks again, Tom.
All the best. Take care.